Hello, and welcome to this course on strategic management, Business 410. In this video, I'm going to summarize the course for you, and I'm going to review the course contents and its schedule, and among other things, how your grade will be calculated, which I imagine you're interested in. So by the time we're done with this video, with this review, you should have a pretty good idea of what is involved in this course and how the course will unfold during the semester. As you probably already are aware, the first meeting of this course will be online. What you may not be aware of is that subsequent meetings of the course also will be online. We won't be meeting in a classroom, but rather we'll continue to meet in Zoom sessions like this one. As the coronavirus pandemic unfolds or hopefully gets better, we may change that and meet in the classroom. I certainly hope we can. I would look forward to getting to know you and meet you. But for the time being, at least, we're going to meet online in Zoom sessions just like this one. So with that, let me see if I can pull up some slides and we'll start this review of the course. And I always wonder whether I'm going to get the right slide because I have a lot in my computer and sometimes I don't succeed the first time, but looks like we have it this one. Okay, so the course is Strategic Management. Actually, in the catalog, I think it's called Business Policy and Strategy. That's a holdover term from way back when strategic management as an academic discipline was just formed. And business policy and strategy was what strategic management courses were called long ago. And Mount Olive continues to use that designation. It's a course on strategic management. Let me see if I can get this thing working here. There we go. So it's a course about strategic management and methods used by managers to take a look at the firm's external environment and understand it in the economy, market, and industry. And then to assess also the firm's competences or capabilities to meet the needs and requirements and limitations in that external environment. So strategic management really is all about trying to achieve a fit between what's going on outside the firm in the economy, market, and industry, and the firm's resources, the firm's capabilities. And it's easier said than done, but the challenge of strategic management is to figure out how to get that fit between what's going on inside that we can control and what's going on outside the firm that we can't control, but we can try to understand and even forecast. So achieving that fit is what strategic management is all about. Surprisingly, let me see if I can get this doggone thing back up here now. I got rid of it, now I can't get it back. But surprisingly, a lot of people who teach strategic management and even some who practice it don't really understand that that's the essential purpose of this discipline is to achieve that fit. And when we do achieve that fit, we'll be able to select standards for success or goals and the objectives of the actions we're going to take to pursue those goals, strategic objectives, for sustained competitive advantage, not just short-term, but long-term, and of course, financial success that comes with that. And finally, to form strategies to achieve the goals, and most importantly, to make strategy happen, to implement it. As we go through the course, I'll be talking about that item because quite remarkably, academics very often spend a lot of time talking about strategy, but not how to make strategy happen. Having been a strategic manager myself, I can tell you that that's really where the rubber meets the road. There's a passage in the syllabus for this course, and I'd just like to remind you it's there and recommend that you read it maybe more than once. The course concentrates on managerial tasks of crafting and implementing comprehensive strategies, comprehensive that, one of the interesting and difficult things about strategic management is that we have to pull all the pieces together, all the parts of the company, all the problems and opportunities to get that fit that I talked about. So it's a comprehensive approach that we have to take. We can't just focus on one discipline or the other. Like other managers, strategic managers have to focus on pulling it all together with the intent of getting competitive advantage that will last a while, sustained competitive advantage. It's one thing to be able to win a battle for a month or two, and it's another to do it for a decade or two. What we're looking for is maybe not the 2 decades of strategic advantage, but maybe 3 or 4 years anyway. So it's all about matching those internal competences to opportunities and problems in the external environment, and then selecting goals, strategic objectives, and strategies, as I just mentioned. So this is it. This is the essence of the course. I won't linger on these slides very often, but very long, but very often students want to know whether their instructor is qualified to teach the course and what biases or point of view the instructor might have. Sadly, a lot of strategic management instructors and other instructors for that matter in academics haven't really done it in real life. And that limits their perspective. For whatever it's worth, I have done it. I was vice president for corporate planning at Phillips Industries. The development, corporate planning and development had to do with acquisitions. That's the term that corporations use to define the responsibility of a manager to go out and to buy other companies or to look for other companies to do acquisitions and divestments. So anyway, I did that with Phillips Industries. I also was the first corporate planning director at Holiday Inn, back when Holiday Inn was really a well-known and important company, because it was the first company to really make a big thing of the lodging industry and the so-called motels. We don't call them motels anymore, but Kemmons Wilson, the guy who started the company and for whom I worked, he called it that. And by the way, Holiday Inn was the name of a movie way back when, and it was about Christmas time. Bing Crosby was the star. You may not even have heard his name before, but Kemmons was so impressed by that movie that he called the name of his company Holiday Inn. That's where it came from. I also was a consultant and helped companies around the world form their strategic plans and do the things that planners do, including acquisitions and divestments. And you can see I did that for PepsiCo as an internal consultant in New York City with Pete Marwick Mitchell and Company, which is now called KPMG. And then as managing principal of a consulting firm that focused on strictly strategic planning, acquisitions, and divestments. In my academic life, I was, while I was still in industry, I was an adjunct professor at Antioch University in its graduate school. And after I retired from industry, I joined North Carolina Wesleyan and later on moved to Mount Olive College, which of course is now the University of Mount Olive. And that was, golly, I think just about 15 years ago. So I'm old. Anyway, that's more than I should have, time than I should have taken to tell you about me. But for those of you who might be interested, that's who I am. One other thing I'll tell you about me, since we're going to be doing this course online. I won't tell you about all my family life, but I will tell you about my dog, Waffles. Waffles is a Labradoodle. He's a great, big, furry, lovable animal. But he's a creature of habit. And so while we're meeting, sometimes when we're meeting, if it's in the evening like this, Waffles will just come prancing in here. He knows he's got the advantage of me because I can't turn away from this camera. And so the only way to get rid of him and satisfy him is give him his cookie. And he'll look right down at the drawer in my desk and or climb on top of me until I give him that damn cookie. So when that happens, I may have to take a brief intermission for a minute and give him his cookie. But I have no doubt that before this course is over, you will meet Waffles. So much for Waffles. Okay, but you'll see him. Okay, the scope of skills that you could learn in this course are, of course, the strategic management process itself, how we go about assessing the relevance of what's going on outside the firm in the economy, market, and industry, insofar as those domains influence the performance potential of our company. This is not a course in economics. It's not a course in marketing. It is a course in industry assessment to a large extent. Because we're trying to compete with other companies in our industry. But in any event, it turns out that this is a very important topic. And one reason is that textbooks in strategic management simply do not deal with economic and marketing issues. I think it's because the authors feel that they should defer to other courses and other professors. So they don't talk about economics and market factors that influence the firm's performance potential. But when we form strategy, we have to respond to those things. And so I've built in extra elements of this course to deal with economic, market, and industry assessment for strategic planning purposes. Among other things, you're going to get some stuff in this course that students in other courses on strategic management don't get, even at the very best universities in the country, because those two topics are just left out. Okay, so you'll pick up some skills on how to evaluate firms' capabilities, to select mission goals and strategic objectives, to form strategies for achieving goals and objectives for strategies to create competitive advantage. And finally, we'll talk about how strategy actually gets implemented. And that, I think, is another area where you may get some information in this course that you don't get in others, because to be very candid, we don't know much about implementing strategy. We know a lot more about how to form strategy than to make it come true. Oh, come on. There we go. So if you just take what I said a minute ago and translate it into the specific objectives for passing quizzes and learning in this course, this is what you come up with: essential strategic management skills, appreciation of a firm's distinctive competence, and its competitive position in the economy, market, and industry as requisites for sustainable competitive advantage. To appreciate that the way we do strategic planning for a single business and a corporation that owns several businesses, and large corporations, if you think about it, usually have several divisions or subsidiaries, and how you go about planning for the whole enchilada, the whole corporation, is much different than the way you go about planning for an individual company. So in a great big company with several subsidiaries, you've got to do both. You've got to do planning for the individual businesses, and you've got to do strategic planning for the corporation as a whole. And they are very different disciplines. Again, awareness of vital strategy implementation skills. I've said gain awareness because strategy implementation really requires getting in and doing the work of the company to make strategy happen. And we can't do that in this course, obviously. We don't have the time or the opportunity. So what I hope to be able to do is make you aware of the different talents and skills and capabilities that are required to make strategy happen. Next to the last bullet, to appreciate the dynamic nature of strategy and the need to plan, replan continuously. I can't tell you how many companies I visited when I first got to them that thought that the idea of strategic planning is to do a plan and just sort of leave it there until the time arises to do it again. Things are changing all the time in the economy, market, and industry, aren't they? As well as the firm's capabilities. So strategic planning has to be a dynamic, ongoing process. We don't do it, at the end of every year before we make the budget. We probably take that opportunity to review the plan, but we review the plan during the year as well. Finally, the strategic planning and strategic management are all-encompassing. They have to be done. That is, the planning has to be done, and the implementation especially has to be done by members of the firm all throughout the firm. Nevertheless, at the end of the day, the manager responsible for seeing to it that there is a plan and that the plan is the best possible is the chief executive. Strategic planning is chief executive material. It's that person's responsibility. No other person has ultimate responsibility for strategic planning. So we'll, from time to time, we'll just think about the concerns of top management that exist in strategic management. Okay, in this case, we're going to have some case studies. We'll have one great big one And I believe that it will probably be John Deere. The formal name is Deere and Company. The reason that I chose that company is because there is a great deal of agriculture here where Mount Olive is located. And also Deere has a variety of types of business so that we can see strategic issues from a variety of points of view. You probably know that Deere is a major manufacturer of agricultural equipment. You may or may not know that it's also a major manufacturer of construction equipment. You probably don't know that it's a major manufacturer of forestry equipment. It also, as you probably know, is a major manufacturer of lawn care and golf course maintenance equipment. In addition to some other recent additions in technology, artificial intelligence to manage the work that machines do in large, expansive farms. So John Deere will give us a chance to look at a very broad perspective of businesses. And Deere also is very involved in international markets. So we'll have a chance to also take a look at some of the markets for agricultural and construction and forestry equipment and golf course maintenance equipment around the world. We've also will be looking at three smaller, what I call mini cases. They're in the back of your textbook. And I think the three cases, there are several in the back of your textbook, but I think the ones we'll be looking at are Under Armour, Tesla, and Starbucks. Not in that sequence, I might add, but each one of these cases has a little different emphasis or perspective that will enable us to look at the issues that come up in their specific situations. By way of example, Starbucks has quite an international dimension to it. Tesla, you're quite aware, I'm sure, is really a revolutionary auto company. Under Armour is a challenger. It's up against some larger competitors, but it's an innovator, as I imagine you know. So these are many cases, which means and they're in the back of your book, and we'll talk about them and simply review some of the main points. And then I'll ask you a question about a strategic issue or two in each one of those many cases. And in a short paper, let me guess, 2 pages. It really depends on your spacing and you know how good you are at using words. But you know, perhaps some people will spend 3 or 4 pages. But it shouldn't take too long to answer these questions about strategic issues in many cases. They're meant to zero in on particular strategic concepts. But it takes time to read those cases. And in the case of John Deere, we'll be studying John Deere throughout the course. So from the very first week to the very last week, we'll be talking about John Deere. When we talk about the economy, we'll ask what economic factors are influencing Deere's performance potential, what market factors, what industry factors, competition and the like, what new technology, what kind of capabilities are required to succeed in Deere's industries, and so forth. And I'm going to ask you to form teams and to look at those issues for the different divisions of DEER. So one team will take a look at agriculture, the other will take a look at construction and forestry products, another golf course and lawn care, and another technology, the new technology capabilities that are being developed at DEER, along with some other items. So it takes time to work on cases, more time than in other courses, to be very honest with you. But it's like lab work in a chemistry lab. When we see how companies have responded to these forces and understand what the impact of these forces has been, we can begin to understand the possibility that there may be some rules here, the way things work. In social science and commerce especially, we don't have the precise laws of physics or chemistry, but we can form some generalities about relationships between the external environment, internal capabilities, and performance potential. I hope that this case, John Deere case, will give you that insight, and that the many cases will as well. Okay, so here's how the course will unfold. First of all, because of the limitations of all strategic management textbooks, not this one, but all of them. By limitations, I mean the exclusion of discussions of how forces in the external environment, specifically the economy and markets, influence performance potential. I have to brief you on that. I have to give you lectures. And I wish it were easy, but it's not. There's a lot of material in those subjects, and so these lectures are kind of long. I won't sugarcoat this. They're long. So you have to carve out enough time and maybe even take a break in the middle of them, just so you can have a fresh mind. Always with the lectures, there will be PowerPoint slides so that you can follow along if you print them off ahead, take some notes. That'll be great for passing tests, and review the PowerPoints after you've seen the video. But each one of the lectures will be a video, just like this one. So the lecture topics are this introduction, application of strategic management principle. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, well, that's right. Course introduction. There's a separate lecture on the scope of strategic management itself. The application of strategic management principles, and I've already mentioned those: economy, market, industry, and capabilities, and implementation. So looks like I should change that right now. It's really 5 lectures. So I was already getting tired when I prepared this slide, and I wanted to turn it into 4 instead of 5. And I might add that this course introduction is really strategic management overview, a summary of the procedures and so forth. Sorry about that. There will be quizzes on each lecture and each chapter. There are 10 chapters in this textbook. I might add that I chose the textbook because one of the authors is one of the absolute, unrivaled, widely acknowledged experts in strategic management. And her name is Margaret Petteraff. And among other things, she's famous for contributing to what's called the resource-based view of competitive advantage. And a couple of the chapters in this book obviously were written by her, and you will benefit greatly from that material, as well as the other material in the textbook. There is a corporate strategy case, as I mentioned. It goes throughout the course. There are 3 tests. You can see them. I'll tell you right now, I couldn't avoid it, but the very first test is by far the largest and the hardest. You might want to write that down. It's a tough test just because there's so much on it. But as we work our way down, the second test is covers 1 lecture and 4 more chapters. And the last test is one that you're going to want to take because it ought to be pretty easy. It's only on 2 chapters and 1 lecture. So my intent with the last 2, and especially the very last test, is to give you a chance to get a good grade, to really raise your average. So don't give up, even after that first test, if it's rough. And after we've finished the course, when we're all done in the very last week, we're going to go over the John Deere case again, try to tie it all together. But throughout the course, you should be gathering information based on the principles of strategic management that we talk about in each week, and make some notes or write little portions of a term paper. And then at the very end of the course, I'll put some specifics on the questions that you should answer in this term paper. But basically, if you take notes each week regarding the Deere case, based on the principles that we discuss each week, when we get to that last week, it shouldn't be too difficult at all to finish up. But at the end of the last week, you will be obliged to turn in this term paper. Okay, so real quick review: quizzes on 10 chapters, 5 lectures, 3 tests on chapters and lectures, 3 discussion papers on the strategic issues on those mini cases. And I did not mention that on the last slide, but there will be a little paper. Oh, I did. Yeah, these are not long papers, but a paper for each strategic issue. And then that big term paper about the John Deere case. Here's how your grade will be calculated. Those quizzes are worth 20 points. The 3 tests are worth 40. And I will try to weight those tests. I have mixed emotions. If I want to help you get a higher grade, I should make each test equally important, even though the first test covers more material than the last 2. So I've got mixed emotions about this, but right now I can tell you that those 3 tests together will be worth 40% of your grade. The 3 mini test case papers will be worth 15 points, and that last corporate strategy paper will be worth 20 points. Now, there is an issue that we need to talk about, and it's the Peregrine test, what's it called, the exit test. I have no authority to change this. This is a requirement of the Tillman School of Business, and it's really not meant to test you or to evaluate your knowledge. Instead, it's intended to evaluate the business school and to find out how well its students have acquired knowledge that other business schools students acquire. So we get evaluated on this. we take a look at the results and we ask ourselves where we need to make improvements and so forth. I have never approved of this outbound exam, it's called, because the subject matter of the exam is not, or just a very small portion related to strategic management. So I fought this and lost. I couldn't get my way. So we are just obliged to have this exam. And I'm also obliged to charge 5 points for the exam. The reason, very honestly, is that if we didn't put some kind of points on it, you would probably not take the exam, and I wouldn't blame you. But these 5 points can be important. Let's say that you've got an A minus before you take the exam and you've finished everything. So you've got a grade of 93. If you don't take those 5 points, you'll end up with 88 because you won't get the final 5. So on the other hand, maybe you could look at it the other way. If you've got an 88 and or thereabouts, and you don't quite have an A, if you get all 5 points from this outbound exam, maybe you'll get an A. So it's worth trying to do a good job. In any event, there's nothing I can do about this. You have to take the test at the end of the course. That's it. Sorry. Okay. Not only that, I think you have to pay to take it. It's okay. So we've already talked about the corporate strategy case. There are lots of examples that I could have chosen. Many of the cases that I've used in the past have rivalry. For instance, Boeing versus Airbus, the drug wars where all the drug companies compete against each other. But they're really fascinating, or they can be. And what we want to do as we go through the course is apply strategic principles from the textbook and the lectures to this John Deere case. And so each team that we're going to form in the first class, I think there will be 3 people in each of 4 teams. So you want to think about who your teammates might be. By this time, you probably know other people taking the course, so you should want to discuss this with them and let me know as soon as possible who you want to be your teammates. In any event, to prepare class discussions on how the economic outlook or the market conditions or industry conditions or capabilities requirements are present in a Deere subsidiary, perhaps the agricultural division. Your team has to gather this information and we'll discuss it during one of the classes each week. And then the term paper I've already discussed. Okay, here are some other, just so that you can appreciate what I was saying earlier. Here are some of the cases that I've worked on with students over the years. There never has been one that's been boring. They're all great. I chose Deere simply because it's close to the local economy, the local markets. Some of you may have families that are engaged in agriculture. Almost every semester, I have students whose families are in agriculture. So I chose the Deere since we're going to be doing much of the course online. I wanted to make it as understandable and comfortable for you as possible. Now, there's somebody in the class who hates agriculture and hates construction and vehicular equipment. And to you, I can only offer my condolences. You're going to have to put up with this for 15 weeks. Okay, so at this point, what I'm going to do is just run through the course and the sequence of activities. So in part one, there will be the introduction that we're in now, the introduction to strategic management methods, and then a couple of chapters. And the good thing about those two chapters is when you're done with those two chapters, you'll pretty much know what strategic management's about. It paints the broad overview of the strategic management process and how strategy is formed. So after we've had chapters 1 and 2, we're really just getting into the fine points and the specifics. But after chapters 1 and 2, you'll have a pretty good idea of what strategic management's about. Okay, so here we are then in part 2. And in part 2, we gather evidence with which to make strategic decisions. I've written papers about these topics and lamented the fact that when we train strategic planners and strategic managers, we really don't get into that external environment enough. We don't get into it in textbooks, with the exception of industry conditions where there is some attention paid to it. But you will find that chapter 3 is good, but it's not going to cover as much as I will in my lecture on industry conditions. Sadly, because so much has been left out, those lectures 2A, 2B, and 2C are long. I think the first one may go for 2.5 hours. So when you get halfway through, take a break and remember that you've got those PowerPoints that you can use to review. So you only have to look at it once. But if you don't look at it, you're really missing, because I can't put everything into those PowerPoints. You need to look at the lecture. The lecture on market conditions is almost as long. The one on industry conditions is not as long, but I think it's still 2 hours or close to it. The lecture on internal capabilities assessment is more traditional. I think it's an hour and a half, something like that. But that's a more traditional strategic management lecture. So there are 4 lectures looking at you. Chapter 3 is the textbook's approach to industry analysis, and there's some overlap with lecture 2C. Chapter 4 is the one that I mentioned earlier. I'm sure Margaret Petteraff wrote that chapter. You're going to learn some stuff there. And what you learn, other students of strategic management may not learn. So by completing the lectures on the external environment and internal capabilities, which is also not well discussed in strategic management textbooks, and then the chapter on resources and capabilities, you're going to come out, you may hate it because there's so much, but you're going to come out knowing a lot more than other people who take other courses in strategic management. For better or worse, you're going to be a lot smarter than them. Part 3 then is about making strategic decisions, and there's a lecture on that. It's not as long as the others, but it's about selecting goals, strategic objectives, forming strategy, and so forth. Chapters 5, 6, 7, and 8 are all about different types of strategy. And I won't bore you with it now, but you can sort of see it. Generic refers to the notion that all companies, all firms can use these strategies. They're general in nature. And then 6, 7, and 8 get into the particulars. And there's a test on chapters 5 through 8 and lecture 4. We'll also start, by this time, we'll have talked a lot about, and you'll have read a lot about strategic management. And we can start to look at some of these mini cases and appreciate the strategic management implications of those cases. The first one you'll look at is Starbucks. The reason it's there is because at this point in the course is because it ties up with international strategy. And it sort of asks the questions, should Starbucks be diversifying at all? Anyway, everything on all in chapters 5 through 8 apply to Starbucks, especially chapter 7. Now we get into strategy implementation in another lecture. And this is the sad part. Courses in strategic management and textbooks, they usually talk about implementation. Unfortunately, the people who write about strategy and teach strategy rarely have done it, rarely have actually done strategic management in an industrial corporate environment. I have. It's just terribly unfortunate that academicians have not spent more time on how strategy happens, how it's implemented, because what I have learned from studying strategy implementation is we don't know much about it. There will be times when I'm going to tell you that I'm going to give you my opinion regarding my judgment from my experience as a strategy manager. But to be honest with you, we just don't have the kind of rigorous rules in implementation that we do when it comes to forming strategy. But lecture 5 will get into as much as I can offer you on implementation. Once again, because you're getting that, and students in other universities are not, if you happen to have aspirations to an advanced management career, if you want to be a top corporate management executive, these things that I've added to the course will give you a chance to succeed when others don't. And believe me, implementation of strategy is critical in that regard. So chapter 9 is not a difficult chapter. It's about ethics and corporate customer service relationships. That's it. It's a good chapter because too often we forget that there are ethics to be taken into consideration. But in the overall scheme of things, the chapter on ethics and customer service relationships are not methodologically critical. Chapter 10 has some good ideas about executing strategy. But again, as I mentioned earlier, it just scratches the surface. Here in this last part of the course, we'll talk about 2 other mini cases at the back of your textbook. Under Armour, which I think is one of the first ones, and Tesla. And I know you're all familiar with Tesla, so that'll be a fun conversation. The very end of the course then includes, which is what we've been talking about, a test on chapters 9 and 10 in lecture 5. That's my way of giving you a gift. You know, you shouldn't have too much difficulty with that test. So that should raise your grade. We're going to review that corporate strategy case on Deere, and then you're going to turn in a paper on John Deere. Finally, just a few brief suggestions to wrap things up here. Make a loose leaf binder. Print those PowerPoint slides. Put them in the loose leaf binder. When you do, you've essentially got a procedure manual for strategic management. You can take it with you to your job. You can keep it with you and use it in your work. And it's like a bunch of checklists. You, if you are so inclined, you can use it in the future. I have students who've done that, and they tell me that they're better off for having done so. So a word to the wise. You're not going to. I've put the second bullet in here, and I hope some of you will read the chapter before class, the class when it's discussed. That will make it possible for you to use the class as a review session, and you should be prime to just turn off the computer and go or turn off step out of the course, the Zoom session, turn on the quiz, take it and get a good grade. If you've read the chapter beforehand and we've gone through the main points of the chapter in class, you ought to be able to just knock that quiz right across the fence. Start reading about Deere now. Get in touch with the company. Ask for its annual report and Form 10K. You can look at those documents on the website, but they're long and you can't flip pages and you can't write on the pages if you're looking at it on the website. If you want to really, do yourself a favor, get in touch with the company, ask for the annual report, ask for the 10K. You may have to tell them you're an investor. Some companies won't send it to you unless you are an investor. You might tell them you're thinking about buying the stock. I doubt that most of you actually own the stock now. Use those online videos. They're there to make things better, more understandable. I know the videos take a long time to watch. It's a lot easier to flip through the PowerPoints. That's why they're there for you. But I can't explain everything on PowerPoints that I can when we're talking like we are now. I simply recommend that you use those online videos for understanding, depth of understanding. There's an illustration of the next point. What you get out of the course will be depend upon what you put into it, whether it's looking at the videos or really working on the case studies, whether it's Deere or one of the many cases. This is one of those courses where if you want to be a manager, if you want to have an accelerated career, and you're willing to put the effort in, when the course is over, you'll have received that benefit. If you're not so motivated, have a nice semester. The course is intensive, and you're going to have to make enough time for it. A good example is those lectures on the external environment. It just took me that long to record videos on each one of those subjects. I'm sorry they're so long, but they are. So take the time and give yourself enough time for all the other elements. By the way, it does take a little time to go over those mini cases. There's some pretty substantial material in those. When you're studying the chapters, the good news about the chapters is they're not terribly long, but you still have to take the time to read them and take the quizzes and so forth. So give yourself enough time to really internalize this material, and hopefully you will benefit from it. And with that, I should have turned this thing off a while ago. But that's it. That's the end of this video. And as you already have probably noticed, it was not short. I, I'm afraid that that's my karma. But thank you for taking the time to look at it. If you have looked at it before class, you're going to have a much better class, and I certainly hope that you do. I look forward to meeting you, and with that, I will end, at least I will try to end this course. Let me see if I can, this